So very good afternoon, dear students. In the yesterday's class, we had talked about Routh-Hurwitz criterion, and we had seen that how by using that criterion, we can determine the stability of the electric network that is represented with the help of network functions. And we had seen that in the Routh array, if there is a sign change in the first column of Routh array, then we call that system as unstable. So there should not be any sign change in the first column of Routh array. In that case, we call the system as stable system. So with this, now we move forward in today's class. And in today's class, we will discuss two more examples related to the stability analysis using Routh-Hurwitz criteria. And then we will see one more important aspect of network function that is very, very important for from understanding point of view. So that way, today's class is important and you must listen to the class carefully. Only then you will be able to understand the concept. And with that, our topic on network functions will be completed in today's class. So I move forward. So this is another example where we have to check the stability of the network function. The network function which is given is s raised to power 4 10s cube plus 35s square plus ks plus 24 equal to 0. So here uh, in the power of s equal to 1, the coefficient is k. K is some coefficient which has not been given beforehand. So it has asked in the question that for what value of k this polynomial will set to be stable. Okay, so we have to solve it using Routh-Hurwitz array. So let us see how to determine this value of k such that our system will be stable. So as we discussed, we start from the highest power, that is S4, and we move up to lowest power, that is S raised to power 0. So we have moved from S raised to power 4 to S raised to power 0. Fine. Then we will write the coefficients alternately. The coefficient of S raised to power 4 is 1, which is written here. Then S cube is 10, which is this. Then S square is 35. We have written that. Then the coefficient of S is k. We have written k as it is. And then the constant term is 24. That is corresponding to S raised to power 0. We have written here. So this we have seen yesterday, that how to write these coefficients alternately. Now we have to calculate this value. So in order to obtain this value, I told you the procedure yesterday. We'll multiply 10 with 35. Okay, that comes out to be 350. Then we multiply 1 and k, that is your minus k. So it is 350 minus k divided by 10. So this is what has been written here, and we are representing that with alpha. Now we have to calculate the coefficient here. So how will we do that? So we will take the first column coefficients, that is your 1 and 10, and then we will take this as 24. So 10 multiplied with 24, that is 240. 1 multiplied with 0, that is 0, divided by 10. So it comes out to be 24 only. Okay, now we have to calculate this. So for this, what we will have to do, we'll have to uh, use the coefficients in the above two rows. So what we have to do, we have to multiply, this is 0. Fine. So in order to obtain this, we'll multiply alpha 1 with k. So this is alpha 1k minus 10 into 24, that is 240. So k alpha 1 minus 240 divided by alpha 1. This is what we have obtained here. And now if we want to obtain this coefficient, for this we'll multiply this thing with 24 minus alpha 1 into 0, that will be 0. And this into 24 divided by this gives us 24 only. So with this, we are able to get all the given, you can say, values. Now we have got the first column of the Routh array. And I told you that for stability, there should not be any sign change in this first column of Routh array. And another thing is that for stability, all the elements of this column, they must be positive, that they must be greater than 0. So this 1 is greater than 0, this 10 is greater than 0. Now we want this alpha 1 to be greater than 0. And what is alpha 1? 350 minus k by 10. This is alpha 1. It has to be 0. And from this only we will determine the value of k. And from here we can easily find out that k must be less than 350, so that alpha 1 is greater than 0. So this thing will ensure stability. Okay, so that way we have obtained the value of k that will basically give us the stability. So k has to be in between your 0 to 350. I hope this numerical is clear to everyone. Very simple. Fine. So now let us see one more example, and it has some different flavor. Let us see that. So here we have been given the network function PS, which is equal to s raised to power 4 plus s cube plus 2s square plus 2s plus 3. This is s. Okay, this is s, not 25. This is 2s. So we will develop Routh array. We have written the coefficients or the power of s in decreasing order. Then we write the coefficient values. So we write 1, then s cube is 1, then s square is 2, then s is 2, then this last term is 3. Now we need to obtain this value. This value will be 1 cross 2, 2, minus 2, 0. So surprisingly, we get 0 in the first column of Routh array. Then we proceed forward. 1 into 3, that is your 3, minus 0 by 1. So we have got 3. Now, what is the problem that we face when we come across a 0 in first column? The problem is when we calculate the next value in the next row, we will divide our result by 0. And whenever we divide something by 0, we get infinity. Let us see how actually we get that. So this is 0. So now we need to obtain the value here. How do we do that? 2 cross 0 is 0. Minus 3, that is your minus 3 divided by 0, that is nothing but infinity. And if infinity comes, this Routh array does not provide any information to us. Okay, so we'll have to resolve this standoff. We'll have to remove this infinite thing here. We'll also have to look into this existence of 0. Okay, only then we will be able to solve it further. So let us see how to resolve this issue. So here it is. What we will do, we know that the first column in the Routh array has to be positive. Okay, and in the previous slide this was 0. So 0 is neither positive nor negative, it is on the borderline. So we will assume that instead of 0 we'll have some term epsilon, and this epsilon is very small value, and we can say that this epsilon tends to 0. It is not 0, it tends to 0. Okay, or you can say it is very small value, which is say some value 0 plus something more than 0. So that we can call epsilon as positive, and that is very reasonable assumption that we are making here. So instead of 0 we will replace 0 by epsilon. So if we have done that, then we will not get infinity. So what we will get, we'll multiply epsilon with 2, that is 2 epsilon. We'll multiply 1 with 3, we get minus 3, divide by epsilon. So what do we get? We get twice of epsilon minus 3 by epsilon. Okay, and then we are also able to get the last row that can be easily obtained. So 2 epsilon minus 3 by epsilon into 3 divided by this, it is nothing but 3 only. So now in order that this network is stable, we want that all the elements in the first column of Routh array, they must be greater than 0. So epsilon greater than 0 we have already assumed. So here in this, we have to get that value of epsilon that will give us positive value. So for that, what we have shown here, that your twice of epsilon minus 3 by epsilon, it has to be greater than 0. So this epsilon is greater than 0. It means twice of epsilon minus 3 also has to be greater than 0, and which will ensure that your epsilon must be greater than 3 by 2. So if we ensure that the value of epsilon is greater than 3 by 2, in that case, our system will be stable. Otherwise, it will not be stable. So in case you happen to come across 0 in the first row of your Routh array, you have to solve your numerical like this. So with this numerical, the topic of determining the stability of network function by using Routh array is completed. So one portion is completed, and I told you that the main important advantage of looking at network function is that we can analyze the stability of the system, and that thing we have justified here with the help of your numerical problems. Okay, so students, after discussing the stability part, now we move to next thing that we can determine from the pole zero plot. We talked about pole zero plot and how to obtain pole zero plot using network function. We had discussed in the previous class in a detailed manner. So today I'm going to present one more aspect of the pole zero plot, and that will also justify that why these pole zero plots are so important. You all know that graphical representation always uh, provides us instant interpretation of the system. So that is also uh, one point in favor of that, that with the help of pole zero plot, today we will find out the time domain behavior. So all of us have studied Laplace transform. Okay, and from Laplace transform, if we wanted say time domain response, what we did, we obtained inverse Laplace of that, and by obtaining inverse Laplace, we used to obtain the time domain behavior. Whereas today also we will find out time domain behavior, but not directly by using inverse Laplace, but by using pole zero plot. Okay, so we will be discussing one more approach in order to obtain time domain behavior. Okay, I hope the purpose of this topic is clear to you. So we will start with the network function, which will be in the form of S, that is, you can say, your Laplace transformed function. Okay, and then instead of obtaining inverse Laplace directly, we will try to obtain inverse Laplace through graphical method. You can interpret it like this. So let us see. So we have network function represented by HS. HS is a ratio of AS upon BS. We have seen that. Then what we do, we factorize AS in the form of its roots, and we call those roots as zeros. So K is a constant, or you can say scaling factor. So AS has been written as S minus Z1, S minus Z2, S minus Zn. These are various factors. Then we represent BS in the form of, you can say, its factors, which are represented through its roots, which we call them as poles. Okay, so we have expressed our network function in the form of its factors. Then if you recall, if we have a fraction in S polynomial, and we discussed that thing in inverse Laplace transform also. So if before calculating inverse Laplace, the simple method was to split this fraction using partial fraction approach. So what we have done, this above expression, we have split using partial fraction. So same thing we did in partial fraction. What we have done, we have written all the factors separately, like S minus P1, S minus P2, S minus PR up to S minus PM. And in the numerator, we have the constants. So we have split our given fraction into partial fractions. And now our job is to find out the values of these k's. Fine. So these k's earlier we used to obtain mathematically using inverse Laplace transform techniques. But here we will determine these k's graphically using pole zero plot. That is the difference. I think this approach is clear to you. So let us see. So mathematically what we did, that if we want to find out Ka, for that we used to multiply this expression with its denominator, that is s minus p1. We used to multiply this entire with s minus p1, and we used to substitute s equal to p1 in the entire expression. So same thing we have done here. What we have done, this was the entire expression. We have multiplied it with s minus pr. That is the factor that we are picking up. That is, say we are picking up this s minus pr. We want to obtain kr. So this is your kr. So we want to multiply entire expression with s minus pr, and we have to substitute s equal to pr. Okay. So what we are doing, we are substituting s equal to pr. So if we do that, what we will have, your s equal to pr will be substituted, and wherever we have s, we will have pr. See, pr minus z1, pr minus z2 up to pr minus zn. And in the denominator, we have pr minus p1, then pr minus p2, then pr minus pm. Okay. So if we solve this, we will be able to obtain kr. So now let us move forward. So just for your reference, I have reproduced the expression that I wrote in the previous slide. Now we have to determine the value of kr graphically using pole zero plot. Let us see how do we do that. Students, first you observe that this pr minus z1, p is a root, z is also a root. Okay. And we are assuming here that for the generalized case, that these roots could be complex numbers. So you can say that your poles are also complex numbers and your zeros are also complex numbers, and real numbers are special cases of your complex numbers. So that way, complex numbers is a generalized representation. So what we have here, we have the difference of complex numbers, two complex numbers in every expression, in every term. So the difference of two complex numbers is also a complex number. So we can say that this pr minus pn, some term in the denominator, that will be a complex number. And I think you already know that if we have a complex number represented as, say, a plus jb, if this is a complex number, we can represent this complex number like this. We can say the magnitude of this complex number, that is m, multiplied with e raised to power j phi, and phi is the phase. Okay. In a way, this is the phasor representation of any complex number. So same is the case here. This MNR is the magnitude of this complex number, and this e raised to power j phi nr is the phase. Okay. And graphically, how do we represent it? Graphically, your complex number can be represented with the help of phasor. If we have, say, a plus jb, so on x-axis we have, say, a, on y-axis we have, say, b. Okay. And your a plus jb will come here. It will come here. This is a plus jb. Okay. And with the help of phasor, you can represent it like this. This is the phasor representation. So the length of this phasor is nothing but the magnitude m. Okay. And the angle of this phasor is nothing but your phi. So this is the graphical representation of the complex number, and this is the phasor representation that we can represent m e raised power j phi. And you already know e raised power j phi is nothing but cos phi plus j sin phi. So you can reduce it and you will again get this complex number representation, like it will be m into cos phi, okay, plus j sin phi. Okay. So if you solve it, you will again get this a plus jb. So this phasor representation of complex number, you already have studied in your junior classes. Just for the sake of your reinforcement of the concept, I have repeated here. Okay. So now in the numerator, we had several complex numbers multiplied with each other, and each complex number will have magnitude and phase. So this is what we have done here. These are the individual magnitudes of each of these complex numbers. Similarly, we have the magnitudes of all the complex numbers multiplied in the denominator also. And regarding phasors, the phases of your numerators, they will be e raised power j phi n1 and 1r, phi 2r, and so on. And we have phasors in the denominator also. And I hope you know this thing, that if we have two complex numbers, okay, one in the numerator and another in denominator, which can be represented like, say, this way, m1 e raised to power j, say, phi 1, and denominator is represented by, say, m2, then e raised to power j phi 2. If you write it like this, then it can be solved like this: m1 upon m2, which will be some constant, say k, then e raised to power j, and the phases will be subtracted. Like in the numerator, it will remain as it is, that is j phi 1, and the denominator phase will come like this: phi 1 minus phi 2. So it can further be simplified like this: k e raised to power j phi 1 minus phi 2. So same thing has been done here. So phi 1r plus phi 2r. So first we are summing all the phases of numerator, and then we are subtracting all the phases of denominator. So this is the generalized representation of your complex numbers in the form of exponential representation, or you can say phasor representation. And why I am again and again highlighting or emphasizing on phasor? Because phasor is a graphical representation, and this is required in order to understand the calculation of time domain behavior from your pole zero plot. So I hope this thing is clear to everybody. So students, these are the steps that we will follow to determine the time domain behavior from pole zero plot. You don't worry, I have incorporated one example also in my slide. I'll explain that example step by step, so that you are able to understand the time domain behavior calculation from pole zero plot. Very simple. You have to just do two things. You have to uh, just a minute. You have to find out these magnitudes of the zero part. You have to obtain the magnitudes of the pole part, and you have to obtain these phase angles, and with that your job will be done. Okay, so these are the steps which I have already explained. So first, what we have to do, we have to plot poles and zeros. So obviously we'll have to obtain pole zero plot. So we have been given network function, that is HS. From HS, we will first find out the poles and zeros. So once we have found the poles and zeros, we will plot them so that we are able to get pole zero plot. Then we will calculate the magnitudes, and magnitudes will be calculated in two ways. That is, first is from the zeros and another is from the poles. I'll tell you in the example. Then we will measure the phase angles. Okay, and then we will substitute the values of these magnitudes and phase angles in the expression that we saw in the previous slide. We will substitute in this expression and we will obtain kr, and this thing will be, you know, done for each and every k, and that's all. We'll be able to obtain time domain behavior. Let us see it with the help of example. So this is the example. So we have been given a network function represented by Vs, which is equal to 10s by s plus 3 into s plus 2. So what we have two poles and we have 1 0, and this 10 is a constant. So I told you we will obtain poles and zeros first, so no need to factorize. This is straightforward thing. We can directly plot poles and zero. So one pole is -2, another pole is -3. This is -2, this is -3. We have represented poles with cross, and this 0 is s equal to 0. So this is s equal to 0, 0. 10 is a constant. So we have obtained the network function from, sorry, we have obtained the pole zero plot from the network function. Then after this, I told you that the network function will be split into partial fractions. So that is what we have done. We have written k1 by s plus 3, one factor, plus k2 by s plus 2, that is another factor. So we have split. This is what we have seen. Now our job is to obtain k1 and k2 graphically from this. So how do we do that? First, here in the solution, k2 is obtained. In order to obtain k2, you see here, k2 is corresponding to the pole s equal to -2. Okay, so let me erase all the ink, then it will be very clear. So first we are calculating k2 for the pole s equal to -2. So let us see, we will identify pole -2. So what we have now to do, we have to calculate the distance of this pole. This pole is now our, you know, main center point. So we have to calculate uh, the distance of this pole from 0. So this is 1 0. So the distance of this pole from the 0 is how much? 2. Okay, distance is always positive, it is never negative. So distance or magnitude is 2. This is 2. So in the numerator part, it will be the distance from zeros, distance of the selected pole from zeros. Okay, and the numerator will be the distance of selected pole from other poles. This you memorize. Okay, so there was only 1 0, that's why only one distance, that is 2, that we have obtained. Now how to obtain the phase angle? So for that, we will draw a phasor from this 0 to pole. This is the phasor line. And how much is the angle from positive x-axis? The angle is 180 degree. It is counterclockwise, and in counterclockwise we take the angle as positive, so it is plus 180. See, 2 e raised to power j 180, and our numerator part is over. Now let us see denominator part. For denominator, I told you that we will be looking at the considered pole from other poles. So we have one pole only. So we will find out the distance from that pole to the pole under consideration. So we have to calculate the distance between -3 pole to -2 pole. How much is the distance? 1. So see, 1 has been written here. Okay. Now phasor angle from -3 to -2. See, this arrow or this phasor in the direction of x-axis only. So if you continue it forward, it will merge with this. How much is the angle in the counterclockwise? 0 degree. Because it is merging with the positive x-axis. So angle is 0. So e raised power j 0. That's all. 10 is the constant, this one. So what we have, 10 into 2, 20. Okay. E raised power j 180. This 0 will come in the numerator with minus sign. So 180 minus 0 is nothing but 180. And e raised to power j 180 is nothing but minus 1. So we get minus 20. So this is how we obtain k equal to minus 20. Now let us find k1. So for k1, the pole is minus 3. So let me erase and then I'll rework out. So for k equal to 1, we have pole is s equal to minus 3. So this is the pole now under consideration. For numerator, we'll have to consider 0. So we will calculate the distance from 0 to this pole. How much is the distance? 3. So 3. And how much is the angle from this 0 to this pole? 180 degree. So e raised to power j 180. Now denominator part. For denominator, the distance from the pole to the considered pole. Pole is minus 2 from minus 3. How much is the distance? 1. So we have 1 here. Then how much is the angle? Now this phasor is directed away from positive x-axis. So how much is the angle? Plus 180. So this is plus 180. So 180 minus 180 is 0. E raised to power j0 is nothing but 1. 10 3 ja 30. So what do we have? We have k1 equal to 30. Okay. And we have k2 equal to minus 20. So we have obtained k1, k2. Now this is straightforward expression. You apply inverse Laplace. What do we get? 30. Inverse Laplace of 1 by s minus 3 is e raised to power minus 3t. Then minus 20. E raised to power minus 2t. Straightforward answer. This is how what we have done. We have obtained Vt. Vt is nothing but your time domain response. So we have obtained the time domain response with the help of pole zero plot. I hope this thing is understood to each and every student. So students, this is second numerical where we will again obtain the time domain response from the pole zero plot. This network function is also a simple network function, but a bit complex as compared to the previous one. Here, the poles are not located only on the x-axis. They are located in between also. So here we will see that how to obtain the time domain behavior, and it will give further insight into the things that we have discussed so far. So is the network function. So let us identify how many poles and zeros are there. There is one zero, that is s equal to 0, that we have represented. Now there are 3 poles. One pole is minus 1, which is represented by p. Its value is minus 1. Now if you factorize it, you will come across 2 more poles, and those pole values are minus 1 plus under root 3j, which is represented here with a cross. Another pole will be minus 1 minus under root 3j. This is another pole. So it will give us complex conjugate roots, which will occur in complex conjugate pairs. So there are 3 poles and 1 0. And now we have split this network function in the form of partial fraction. There are 3 factors, k1, k2, and constants k1, k2, k3, and these are the 3 poles: s plus 1, s plus 1 minus under root 3j, then s plus 1 plus under root 3j. So here we had minus. So now our job is to calculate the value of k1, k2, and k3. We will obtain their value one by one. So for k1, let us see. For k1, the pole under consideration is s equal to minus 1. So this is the pole. We have to find the distance of every 0 from to this pole. So what we will do, we'll draw a phasor from this 0 to this pole for numerator part. So how much is the distance? Distance is 1. See, this is 1. The direction of phasor is directed towards negative x-axis. So how much is the angle? 180 degree. Numerator part is over because we have 1 0. If we would have more than 1 0, then we should have calculated other distances also. Now we have, apart from this considered pole, we have 2 more poles. So we will now find out the distance and the phasor angle. Let us see. So this is the considered pole. We will find out the distance from this pole to the considered pole. How much is the distance? Distance is under root 3j. In fact, under root 3. J indicates the complex number only. So this is under root 3. Now we will calculate the angle. So if you look at this, the angle of this, the direction of this phasor is directed towards negative y-axis. Okay. So the angle could be, if you start from this, the angle will be 270 degree, or in other words, if you take clockwise, the angle will be minus 90 degree for this phasor. So this is the minus 90 degree phasor. Fine. Now let us calculate the magnitude and phase for third pole, that is this one. We'll draw a phasor from P2 to P. How much is the distance? Distance is under root 3. And how much is the angle, phase angle? It is directed towards positive y-axis, and the angle is plus 90. So this is plus 90. So 90 minus 90 is nothing but 0. E raised power 0 is 1. So 1 by under root 3 becomes 3. So 1 by 3 is nothing but 0.67 e raised power j180. And you solve it, you get this. This is how we obtain K1. Now let us see how to obtain the value of K2. For K2, the considered pole is S equals to -1 plus root 3j. That means this one. This is the considered pole now. So we have to first calculate the numerator part. For numerator, we will calculate the distance from the 0 to this pole. So how much is this distance? This distance will be, you'll have to draw a line downwards. So this become a right angle triangle. You apply Pythagoras theorem. So this magnitude M will be this square plus this square. And how much is this? Root 3. Root 3 square is 3. How much is this? 1. 3 plus 1, 4. And it's under root. It gives us 2. So the value of M, or the distance of this pole from this 0, is 2. See, you have got 2. Okay. Now let us calculate the phasor angle. Angle of this phasor. The angle from positive x-axis will be this one. And how much is this? This one is, this is 90. 90 plus some angle. Okay. So see, this is 90 plus. How much is the angle? How much is this angle? This angle is, if you, let me redraw it. We have to calculate this angle. This is 90. We have already seen. We have to find out this angle. This angle is, what is tangent phi? So if you consider this triangle, tangent phi will be equal to perpendicular upon base. And what is the perpendicular value? Perpendicular value is equal to OP. OP, or this one. Okay. So, and what is the value of OP? OP is 1. Okay. Base, how much is base? Base is this one on y-axis, and this is equal to PP1. And how much is this? 1 by root 3. Fine. So, and tangent inverse 1 by root 3 is nothing but 30 degree. So 90 plus 30, how much? 120. So this phase angle comes out to be how much? 120 degree. This is numerator part. Now we have to calculate denominator part. For pole it is done. For denominator, so for denominator, this is the considered pole. Let us consider this. We will draw a phasor. How much is the distance or the magnitude? That is root 3. See, this is root 3. How much is the angle? Plus 90. This is plus 90. Now let us consider another pole. For another pole, this will be the distance. How much is the distance? 2 root 3, twice of root 3. How much is the angle? Plus 90, plus 90. That's all. So 2 was a constant, and this 2 and 2 will be cancelled. It will be 2 by 3. Okay. So then what we have, this 180 in the denominator will go in the numerator. Okay, and I told you that this is how much? 120. 120 minus 180 is minus 60. Okay, and we get this e raised by minus j60. This is how you can calculate what? You can calculate k2. Now we know that the root of k2, term corresponding to k2 and k3, they are complex conjugate. If you have obtained for k2, k3 will be nothing but its complex conjugate. If you have minus j, you'll have plus j here. That's it. K3 is equal to complex conjugate of k2. And if you do that, we have obtained k1, k2, k3. Okay, you substitute and you already know the answer. The inverse of s plus 1 is e raised by minus t. The inverse Laplace of this is e raised power minus of 1 plus under root 3 j t, and similarly this is our time domain behavior from the pole zero plot. So I hope every student is able to understand the calculation of time domain response if you are given pole zero plot. So that was the last application of your network function with the help of pole zero plot. So I hope all of you are very comfortable with this approach now, and you have understood all the concepts. I'll appeal to all the students to read it from the book and try to understand further. And if there is any doubt, you can discuss with me. So I stop here and we will continue in the next class.